There are moments in life when the body whispers before it breaks, when the soul trembles before it forgets what it means to be whole. It begins in silence, in the stillness of night, when the heart beats like a distant drum and the world finally stops demanding your attention. In that quiet space, the body remembers what it was made for: renewal. For centuries, healers, monks, and sages spoke of a simple truth hidden in plain sight, that healing is not found in the complex, but in the humble, the elemental, the sacred. They said that every substance created by nature holds a memory, a frequency, and that water, more than anything else, is the language of creation itself. Every time you drink, you invite that language into your being. Every sip becomes a prayer. Every swallow becomes an offering. So what happens when you align that act, the most natural of all, with intention, ritual, and awareness? What happens when for 7 nights you do not simply drink, but listen? They say the body begins to speak back. On the first night, as you hold the cup in your hands, you feel the faint hum of something ancient, something that predates words. The warmth of your palms transfers to the glass, the surface trembling almost imperceptibly as if it recognizes you. This is no longer just water. It becomes a vessel, a reflection, a mirror for your inner world. You take a breath, slow, deliberate, and the air itself seems to thicken with presence. You begin to sense that healing is not an event, it is a remembering. The old scriptures, once written on temple walls and palm leaves, spoke of this act. They called it the communion of the elements. To them, water was not inert. It was divine consciousness in liquid form. They believed that every molecule vibrated with awareness, storing the energy of thought, emotion, and faith. When blessed or spoken to with love, it responded like a living being. When ignored or cursed, it turned chaotic, fragmented, confused. And since we are mostly made of it, our bodies too echo those patterns. That is why your words, your emotions, your faith, they are not abstract. They shape the structure of what you are. The 7-night ritual is not superstition, it is synchronization. For when you drink with reverence, your body aligns to the frequency of harmony, and the cells begin to remember their original design, balance. You may not notice it at first. The first night feels ordinary, yet something subtle changes, not outside, but within. Sleep feels deeper, dreams more vivid. The air around you seems to carry a faint sweetness, as if the space itself recognizes the ritual unfolding. This is how ancient transformation begins, quietly. The sages taught that true alchemy is not about turning metal into gold, but turning chaos into coherence. The cup in your hands is a chalice, the kind once used in mystery schools hidden beneath temples and monasteries. They believed that by charging water with intent, they could access the divine intelligence woven through all creation. Modern science, though hesitant, has begun to catch up. Researchers studying water clusters, electromagnetic resonance, and molecular memory have found that structure matters, that vibration influences geometry. It's as if the universe itself whispers, everything listens. Every sound, every thought, every heartbeat sends ripples through the unseen fabric that connects all living things. So as you drink, you are not merely hydrating the body, you are writing messages into your own cells. You are rewriting your biology with belief. By the second night, something awakens. You feel drawn to light, the moon through the window, the faint glow of dawn. You start noticing how your breath flows differently, how your heartbeat feels calmer, as though something invisible has begun to realign. You remember the stories your ancestors told, of sacred wells where the sick were healed, of rivers where sins were washed away, of springs that never dried even through famine. These were not metaphors. They were instructions. The body is the temple and water is the priest. As it moves through you, it consecrates, purifies, blesses. It carries away the remnants of unspoken pain. The mystics called this liquid forgiveness. You begin to realize that the ritual is not about what you drink, but what you release. For every sip you take, something old departs. A memory, a burden, a fragment of fear. The more you surrender, the lighter you become. The more you trust, the more the body softens its grip on suffering. Healing does not enter by force. It flows where resistance fades. The truth is, every illness is a form of forgetting, forgetting the sacred rhythm that once guided your cells, your breath, your heartbeat. The 7 nights are your return to that rhythm. On the 3rd night, the world begins to change in color. The morning sun looks warmer, the wind feels alive. You find yourself craving simplicity, less noise, fewer distractions, softer moments. That is the first sign of internal coherence. The monks of Tibet, the healers of Egypt, the priests of the Andes, all spoke of this stage. They called it the softening. When the soul starts to heal, the body follows. You may feel waves of emotion, sadness, joy, nostalgia, as if old fragments of your story rise from the deep. Let them come. The water carries memory, and through it, your body releases what it no longer needs. In ancient monasteries, initiates were given water blessed under moonlight and told to drink it in silence. They believed the moon amplified the healing frequency, binding the water to the rhythms of creation. They would sit in darkness, hands cupping the chalice, listening not with their ears but with their hearts. What they discovered was that silence itself is medicine. In silence, the molecules of your being realign. In silence, you remember that the universe was born not from noise, but from stillness. On the 4th night, you begin to dream differently. Not the fragmented dreams of stress and memory, but visions, gentle, symbolic, archetypal. You see rivers that glow, hands offering light, doors opening where none existed. These are not random. They are echoes of your subconscious, adjusting to a higher rhythm. The ancients said that healing begins in the dream world before manifesting in flesh. The Egyptians built entire temples for sleeping rituals, where priests guided dream healing through sacred water. The body, they knew, could only heal what the soul had already accepted. That is why this ritual works beyond the mind. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to essence. You may feel tingling in your hands, warmth in your chest, tears without reason, all signs that energy is moving again. You are returning to flow. Modern language would call it coherence, parasympathetic restoration, neurochemical harmony. The mystics called it grace. By the 5th night, you start feeling a subtle joy, unprovoked and quiet. You wake lighter, as if gravity itself loosened its hold. This joy is not external. It's the residue of equilibrium. Your cells begin to vibrate at the frequency of gratitude, and the body, once burdened by unprocessed emotion, becomes transparent to light. You may notice you crave fresh food, clean air, gentle movement. The body is intelligent. When it remembers its sacred nature, it guides you toward what sustains it. The ritual is working. You begin to sense that water is not just matter. It is memory, consciousness, reflection. Every night that you drink with awareness, you participate in an invisible dialogue between body and spirit. You begin to understand why the old scriptures said, "Man is the vessel of the divine." You are not healing because something external entered you. You are healing because the truth within you was given space to breathe. Water merely opened the door. On the 6th night, the veil between physical and spiritual begins to thin. You notice how emotions arise and dissolve with less effort, how intuition becomes sharper. You feel a strange compassion for things you once ignored. A bird on the window, the pulse of rain against glass, the hum of distant traffic. Everything feels alive, connected, breathing in rhythm with you. This is the frequency of unity, what mystics called the song of the waters. In this vibration, the body heals, not because it is forced to, but because it can no longer remain in dissonance. Old tensions fade, the mind quiets, the heart opens. You realize that healing is not a battle, but a remembering of peace. The water within you, once chaotic, burdened by years of noise, worry, and neglect, begins to mirror the stillness of sacred lakes. In that stillness, miracles are natural. The Japanese researcher Masaru Emoto once photographed ice crystals formed from water exposed to words of love and gratitude. Their geometry was perfect, radiant, harmonious. But water exposed to hatred, fear, or anger became distorted, fragmented. Now imagine your body, 70% water, being exposed to your thoughts every day. Every emotion, every belief leaves an imprint. So when you drink with intention, you are blessing yourself from within. You are rewriting the crystalline geometry of your being. That is not poetry. It is physics of the soul. By the seventh night you begin to feel it, a quiet power, neither loud nor dramatic, but deep and unshakable. You look in the mirror and notice your eyes seem clearer, your skin brighter, your posture softer yet stronger. But the most profound change is invisible. It's the feeling that you are finally home within your own body. The ritual ends, but its echo remains. You understand now that the body was never your prison. It was your temple. Every cell a chapel, every heartbeat a hymn. The 7 nights were not about the water. They were about you, about remembering that you are made of the same intelligence that flows through rivers, rains, and oceans, that the universe itself drinks through you. You begin to realize why ancient healers never separated the physical from the divine. They saw no boundary between science and spirit, between chemistry and consciousness. The elements were their scriptures, the rituals were their prayers, the body was their sacred text. And within that text one truth was written again and again, that what you bless, blesses you back. As you take your final sip on the 7th night, you feel gratitude, not the gratitude of the mind but of the soul. You close your eyes, and for a moment, time dissolves. You can almost hear the hum of creation itself, a low, infinite vibration that feels both distant and intimate. It moves through you, through the water, through the very air you breathe. In that moment, you understand. Healing is not about adding something new, but returning to what you have always been, whole, complete, divine. The ritual was a mirror showing you that truth. And though the 7 nights are over, their rhythm lingers in your being. Every drink, every breath, every thought can now be sacred if you let it. The body, once tired, now listens. The soul, once restless, now remembers. The water, once ordinary, now carries your song. And you finally are both vessel and ocean. It begins the next morning, when you wake before the alarm, as if something ancient within you has taken over the rhythm of waking. You notice the light differently, softer, fuller, almost deliberate. The sun no longer feels like an external glow, but like a heartbeat extending from the horizon into your skin. The ritual may have seemed simple, 7 nights, 1 drink, 1 intention, but now the question lingers like incense in the air. What was it that truly changed? The drink, the water, the energy, or the consciousness that met it halfway? In the oldest temples of Sumer and the hidden libraries of Alexandria, fragments of texts speak of the elemental covenant, a forgotten agreement between humanity and the forces of nature. It said that when the first human drank from the earth's water, the body and the planet entered into sacred reciprocity. The body would carry the memory of the rivers, and the rivers would carry the memory of the body. Healing was not a gift to be earned, but a balance to be restored. Modern life broke that covenant. Distraction, noise, and artificiality have drowned the subtle languages that once united us with creation. But you, without knowing it, have begun to listen again. The act of 7 nights was not symbolic. It was the key to reopening that ancient conversation. You are remembering the covenant. In those hidden writings, preserved by monks who feared their destruction, there was mention of the water of Genesis. It was believed that all life began not from chemical accident, but from consciousness merging with liquid matter. When divine thought first vibrated, it did so through the medium of water, the carrier of form, emotion, and intention. Every creation thereafter was an echo of that first union. The mystics taught that to drink with awareness was to realign oneself with the primordial act of creation. When you lifted that glass to your lips, you were participating in the same sacred gesture that birthed stars. You were declaring, "I am part of the whole, not apart from it." That is why the body responded so profoundly. You did not introduce a new substance. You reactivated an old dialogue. And the body, grateful for being heard, began to heal. This is why, across cultures and millennia, water is at the center of initiation. The baptismal font, the river Ganges, the spring at Delphi, all symbols of renewal through remembrance. Those who stepped into sacred water were not cleansed of sin. They were reconnected to the source. To heal is to return home. But the revelation runs deeper still. Ancient physicians of Persia, wrote that every element carries both physical and spiritual aspects, inseparable and reflective of one another. Fire burns in the soul as passion, air breathes through thought and inspiration, earth stabilizes through structure and body, and water feels, remembers, transmits. It is the carrier of emotion and the translator between the visible and invisible. When one falls ill, it is often because their inner water has become stagnant. Emotion unexpressed turns heavy, creating dissonance in the body's natural current. The 7-night ritual was designed to stir those waters. Each night was an invocation, a rhythmic pulse reminding your cells how to move again. That is why tears came unprovoked, why dreams resurfaced, why memories once buried bubbled to the surface. The ritual was not adding energy, it was releasing what had been trapped. As the body's inner tides begin to flow, the mind clears, and in that clarity awareness expands. You begin to see the hidden architecture of everything. The revelation continues in how you now perceive the mundane. You pick up a lemon, slice it, and the scent feels alive. Not chemical, not just citrus, but a vibration of sunlight made edible. You feel the salt on your tongue and recognize it as the residue of ancient seas, older than memory itself. You realize that nothing you touch is separate from the cosmos, that the atoms in your blood once drifted through supernovas. The mystics always knew this. They didn't see nature as resource but as reflection. To them, the body was the earth in miniature. The same rivers, the same storms, the same fires of transformation. When they spoke of cleansing the liver, they also meant purifying anger. When they spoke of cooling the heart, they meant calming desire. Every herb, every mineral, every ritual was a conversation between matter and meaning. The water you drank is the oldest messenger of all. It travels through time, through oceans and clouds, through bodies and breath, carrying whispers of every life it has touched. When you drink it with intention, it brings you those whispers. It delivers ancient knowledge not as words, but as resonance, something you feel in the marrow more than you can explain. On the second morning, you notice patterns, coincidences that seem deliberate. You think of someone and they call. You hear a song you'd long forgotten, and its lyrics seem to speak directly to your moment. These are not accidents. When the body enters coherence, it tunes to the same frequency as the world around it. The sages called this the law of reflection. They believed that the outer world is not something happening to you, but something resonating with you. Your experience becomes a mirror of your inner vibration. The clearer your water within, the clearer your reflection without. That is why during these days, synchronicities multiply. The universe does not suddenly become magical. You simply become receptive. You start to live in alignment with the same intelligence that guides seasons, tides, and stars. Healing, it turns out, is not personal, it's universal. You are tuning yourself back to the original orchestra of existence, and then something subtler happens. You begin to feel guided. You find yourself drawn to certain places, certain sounds, certain silences. Perhaps you reach for herbal tea instead of caffeine without knowing why. Perhaps you take a walk at dusk and notice the way the air feels thicker, luminous, charged. This is the moment when the revelation shifts from knowledge to communion. The ancients described this stage as the listening. It is when the spirit within recognizes the spirit without. Your intuition sharpens because it's no longer blocked by static. The same way still water reflects perfectly, a still mind perceives truth without distortion. You begin to sense that life is speaking to you constantly, through symbols, sensations, timing. The healing drink was never the destination, it was the opening of the channel. Now through that channel wisdom begins to flow. In the ancient mystery schools of Egypt, initiates were trained to read the water. They would gaze into basins until visions appeared, not illusions, but transmissions from the deeper mind. Water, being the perfect mirror, reflected not only faces but the hidden architecture of reality. To read the water was to perceive truth without interference. Modern science might call it quantum coherence or non-local communication, but the essence remains. Consciousness and matter are one dance. You are the observer and the observed. The water within you perceives the water outside you, and they respond to each other. This is why prayer works. This is why thought can heal. The field connecting everything is real, and your ritual has tuned you into it. You have become both participant and witness in the living tapestry of creation. But revelation is never just light, it is also shadow. When the body begins to purify, so too does the mind. You may feel waves of fatigue, bursts of emotion, flashes of old memories. This is the water cleansing the psychic residue stored in cells. Each emotion you once avoided, fear, anger, shame, left behind a chemical echo. Now, as flow returns, those echoes dissolve. It may feel uncomfortable, but it is grace in motion. The mystics called this the burning in the waters. When purification feels like chaos before peace, it is the storm that clears the air. It is the release that precedes rebirth. You are witnessing the dissolving of illusions that kept you small. The drink you took for 7 nights was a seed, and now it germinates within you, breaking old shells. What feels like turmoil is simply expansion in disguise. In those moments, remember the breath. Inhale softly, exhale fully. Feel the rhythm of your chest as it rises and falls, like tides obeying unseen moons. Every breath is water vapor entering and leaving your body. You are in constant exchange with the atmosphere. The same molecules that once filled the lungs of saints and emperors now pass through you. You are not just living in the world is living through you. This understanding is the foundation of sacred science. It reveals that individuality is an illusion of scale. The drop and the ocean are not different in essence, only in form. So when you heal, you do not just heal yourself. You participate in the healing of the whole. By the 3rd morning, this realization deepens. The physical body begins to mirror the energetic clarity within. Inflammation subsides. The breath feels easier. Your senses sharpen. You start craving truth, in food, in people, in experiences. Things that once drained you now repel you naturally. Things that nourish you call louder. This is alignment. It's not discipline, it's instinct restored. The ancients said that when a person remembers their divine nature, the body reorganizes around that memory. Cells respond to consciousness like instruments tuning to a frequency. This is why spontaneous remissions occur. Why faith heals where medicine fails. Why some people glow though they've done nothing extraordinary. They are attuned. They drink from the source within, not just the glass before them. And this state is not rare. It is your original condition. The ritual merely stripped away the noise that kept you from hearing your own music. The revelation ends in simplicity, the kind that feels infinite. You realize that the miracle was never the drink, but the awareness that came with it. You can now sense energy moving through your hands, warmth gathering where attention goes. You feel that every thought carries weight, that gratitude transforms reality itself. You've become the alchemist of your own field, no longer dependent on rituals, but infused with their essence. And yet the ritual lives on through you. Every time you pour a glass of water, you feel reverence. Every time you touch it, you whisper a silent blessing. Not from superstition, but from knowing. You've become what the ancients called a keeper of flow, one who remembers that the divine speaks most clearly in what seems ordinary. You now walk differently, breathe differently, exist differently. The revelation is complete. Healing is not found. It is remembered, and the key has always been within your hands, your breath, your cup. It begins quietly, like dawn entering a darkened room, and you realize that what has changed inside you is not the body, but the way you inhabit it. You no longer move through your days with the same haste, nor do you speak to yourself with the same unconscious cruelty. Something in you has softened, as if a weight that had lived in your chest for years has melted away without you noticing. That is the first sign of transformation, when the body begins to reflect the peace that the soul has finally allowed. The 7 nights of drinking were never meant to fix the body. They were meant to awaken it, to remind it of the design it once held before fear rewrote its code. Every cell carries memory. Every atom holds a story, and for too long those stories have been written in the language of stress, guilt, and separation. Now, through the sacred act of intention, the old language fades. Your inner waters begin to rewrite themselves in gentler words, words of acceptance, of faith, of quiet awe. You are not healing. You are remembering what it feels like to be unbroken. The transformation deepens with each breath. You begin to notice patterns in your body, rhythms you never paid attention to before, the pulse in your wrists, the heat behind your eyes, the silence between heartbeats. You begin to sense that the body is not merely biological, it is musical. Every organ is an instrument, every function a note, and when you align with peace, the music changes. Ancient healers called this the symphony of being. They knew that illness was dissonance, when the song of the cells lost its harmony with the soul. But when the soul begins to sing again, the body remembers its melody. You start feeling this harmony as subtle vibrations, tingling in the fingertips, warmth spreading through your spine, gentle waves across your skin. These are not random sensations. They are evidence of coherence returning. Science would call it nervous regulation or parasympathetic activation, but the mystics would smile and say it is grace, the energy of life remembering itself through you. Now that the waters within are clear, emotion becomes movement instead of weight. You no longer fear sadness or anger because you see them for what they are, currents passing through the river of the soul. You allow them, and by allowing, you dissolve them. This is the essence of transformation, not resisting, but witnessing. The monks who practiced the rite of the 7 waters used to say, "That which you resist remains, that which you bless becomes light." You are beginning to understand this truth. When you bless your pain instead of rejecting it, it loses its power to hurt. When you bless the body instead of condemning it, it becomes your ally. When you bless the past instead of resenting it, it becomes your teacher. Transformation is not the erasure of darkness, it is the sanctification of it. The light grows not by fighting the shadow, but by illuminating it. The more you live this way, the more miracles begin to unfold in ordinary moments. You notice how your body responds differently to sound, how music seems to vibrate through your bones instead of merely reaching your ears. You begin to feel energy from people before they speak, warmth or chill, openness or resistance. You sense what your body needs without calculation. Rest instead of caffeine, solitude instead of noise, nature instead of distraction. You start craving authenticity like water after drought. The false falls away effortlessly. The people who drain you fade from your orbit, while those who match your new rhythm appear as if summoned. This is not coincidence. You are now a frequency, and the universe, bound by resonance, organizes itself around you. The sages of old understood this law. The inner determines the outer. They built temples not to pray for miracles, but to become them. The more aligned they were, the more reality responded. You are now walking that same path, not as follower but as remembering priest. As transformation continues, your perception of time begins to shift. Hours feel elastic, moments stretch, and the boundaries between past and present soften. You begin to live in a slower pulse, where each breath feels eternal. The Japanese monks who practiced water meditation called this state Mizu no Kokoro, the mind like water. When undisturbed, it reflects everything perfectly. When agitated, it distorts. Most of life, they said, is spent in ripples, reacting to winds not of our choosing. But when the surface calms, truth becomes visible again. You now begin to live from that stillness. You find beauty in pauses, meaning in silence, guidance in simplicity. The transformation is not flashy or loud, it is subtle and sacred, like the turning of the tide. You begin to realize that the goal was never to become something new, but to return to what you already are, vast, luminous whole. One evening, as you pour another glass of water, not because the ritual demands it, but because it feels like communion, you notice the light catching on its surface. The reflection seems alive, almost conscious. You stare into it, and for a moment, you recognize yourself. Not the self of name, age, or history, but the timeless presence that watches through your eyes. The mystics called this the mirror of the divine. It is said that when you see yourself truly, the illusion of separation dissolves. You no longer see the body as a vessel of survival, but as a luminous instrument of perception. You realize that the same intelligence that guides the water's flow through rivers also guides the blood through your veins. The same force that turns sunlight into fruit turns breath into life. You are not a bystander of creation. You are creation remembering itself. That understanding changes everything. It erases fear. It ends loneliness. It transforms existence into devotion. Transformation, however, does not come without testing. As your vibration rises, everything that no longer aligns begins to surface for release. You may find yourself revisiting old memories or facing discomfort you thought long gone. Do not mistake this for regression. It is purification. Just as spring floods cleanse the rivers of winter's debris, your consciousness is flushing what no longer belongs. The key is trust. Let it flow. Let it move through you without clinging. The mystic said, "When the waters rise, stand still, for only in stillness can clarity return." You begin to understand why so many seekers feared the middle of the journey, because this is where the ego dies. It resists, it bargains, it mourns the familiar. But on the other side of that surrender, freedom waits. You do not need to destroy the ego. You only need to stop feeding it with fear. As you drink, breathe, and trust, the false dissolves gently, like salt returning to the sea. The transformation reaches its peak when gratitude becomes your default state. You no longer need reasons to feel it. You wake grateful for the air, the warmth, the chance to begin again. You look at your reflection and see beauty not as appearance, but as presence. You start blessing everything: the pain that shaped you, the silence that taught you, the water that mirrored you. You realize that every drop of suffering was only life's way of calling you back home. Gratitude, you discover, is the highest frequency, the point where healing becomes creation. In gratitude, you stop asking and start listening. In gratitude, you become the prayer itself. And then, in one quiet moment, something within you clicks, not an epiphany of the mind, but a recognition of the soul. You feel it in the chest, behind the ribs, a warm pulse expanding outward. It feels like love, but deeper, like the universe exhaling through you. It is the realization that everything that ever happened, every mistake, every delay, every loss, was part of a larger intelligence guiding you here. You understand why water had to be the teacher, because water never resists, never doubts, never clings. It flows, it yields, and in yielding, it conquers. Transformation, then, is not becoming stronger, it is becoming fluid. You stop fighting the current and let it carry you. You stop controlling and start trusting. That is the real miracle. Not to escape the storm, but to learn to move with its rhythm. You begin to live differently. You eat slower. You listen deeper. You speak less but mean more. Your relationships shift from need to presence. You start healing others without trying. Through energy, through calmness, through the way your silence makes them feel safe. The energy you carry becomes medicine. This is why the ancient healers were never doctors but presence itself. People were healed simply by being near them because they radiated coherence. You begin to understand that you too are a conduit. You were never meant to hoard light but to transmit it. The ritual that started with a cup of water has turned you into a spring. You give without depletion because the source that flows through you is infinite. When you finally rest that night, the body feels different, lighter yet fuller, grounded yet vast. The dreams that come are not dreams at all but transmissions, memories of ancient lives, symbols of transformation, images of light expanding in spirals. You awaken knowing you are not the same. You cannot be. The transformation is complete in essence, though it will continue in form. You have become both the healer and the healed, both the seeker and the found. The ritual was not an end but a threshold. Beyond it lies a new way of being, one where every glass of water is holy, every breath is sacred, and every heartbeat echoes the rhythm of creation itself. You are not the one who drinks anymore. You are the water that remembers, the flow that restores, the silence that heals. It begins before dawn, when the first light brushes against the horizon, and the air carries the scent of beginnings. You wake not from sleep, but from a deeper kind of rest, the kind that happens when the soul has stopped running from itself. The silence feels alive, charged with presence. There is no thought yet, only awareness, a gentle hum like the sound the world must have made before language. For a moment, you feel suspended between worlds, no longer confined by the boundaries of the body. yet deeply anchored within it. This is the threshold of awakening, when you realize that what you once called you was only the surface of something infinite. The ritual of the 7 nights was never about water. It was about this, about dissolving the illusion that you were separate from what you drink, from what you breathe, from what you love. You are not the one observing life, you are life observing itself. The drop has realized it was never apart from the ocean. The awakening moves through you like a tide that cannot be resisted. Every inhale feels like the universe entering your lungs, every exhale like a quiet offering back to creation. You begin to sense energy not as concept, but as experience. The vibration behind the heartbeat, the current behind the breath. The ancients called this the song of being, the hum that underlies all existence. It is not heard with the ears, but felt with the soul. It vibrates through stones, through rivers, through the very fabric of space. It is what keeps planets in orbit and thoughts in motion. You have become aware of it now, and awareness itself transforms everything it touches. The same way light reveals what darkness hides, awareness reveals the unity beneath the illusion of separation. You begin to see how every pain, every fear, every desire was part of the same longing, the longing to remember yourself. The human condition, you realize, is not a punishment. It is a game of divine forgetting. We fall asleep so that waking can be rediscovered as ecstasy. The old scriptures of India spoke of this moment as Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. Not emotions, but states of being. When you rest in this awareness, suffering becomes transparent. The body still feels sensations, but they no longer define you. Thoughts still arise, but they pass like clouds. The storm no longer frightens you because you have become the sky that holds it. You begin to live from that spaciousness. Life continues. You walk, eat, speak, but everything feels infused with quiet holiness. You start noticing how everything breathes together. The tree outside exhales what you inhale. The ocean thousands of miles away pulls the tide in your blood. You are not in the world is in you. This is awakening, not escape from life, but merging with its pulse. In this state, the mind no longer seeks proof. It doesn't need to. Knowing has replaced belief. You see how all spiritual traditions were different languages describing the same truth. The monks who blessed water, the shamans who sang to rivers, the scientists who studied molecular resonance, all were touching the same mystery from different doors. The door you entered was simple, a glass of water and the willingness to listen. That simplicity was the test. Truth is always hidden in the ordinary. The ego seeks grandeur. The divine hides in smallness. The act of drinking became your initiation. The way silence became the voice of the eternal. As awareness deepens, time begins to dissolve. The past feels like echoes, the future like mist. Only presence remains, vast, eternal, unmoving. You find yourself less reactive, more observant. Situations that once triggered fear now feel like ripples on the surface of a still lake. You respond, but no longer from compulsion, from clarity. This clarity is not intellectual, it's energetic. It feels like light shining from within, illuminating every corner of your being. The sages said that when one awakens, they no longer see the world as material, but as vibration, as consciousness condensed into form. Every object glows with subtle life. Every sound vibrates with purpose. You realize that matter is only slowed down light, and thought is the movement of that light. To live in this awareness is to live in wonder. You begin to perceive a hidden intelligence moving through everything. When you walk, the ground seems to rise to meet your feet. When you speak, the right words emerge effortlessly. When you pause, the universe fills the silence with meaning. The ancient mystics called this flowing with Tao, the art of allowing the universe to move through you instead of resisting it. It is the end of effort, the beginning of grace. You notice that even challenges arrive with precision, not as punishments, but as invitations to grow. Every difficulty now feels like a sculptor's hand shaping marble. The ego mourns, but the soul smiles. You understand now that nothing is against you. Everything is for your awakening. This state does not separate you from humanity. It deepens your compassion for it. You begin to see the pain of others not as failure, but as forgetting. You see their anger as unhealed love, their fear as misplaced faith. You no longer judge, you bless. Your presence becomes a refuge for others, not through preaching, but through being. People feel calmer near you, not knowing why. They feel seen without words, healed without touch. This is the true meaning of light, not brightness, but awareness that dissolves shadow by simply existing. You become a mirror in which others glimpse their own divinity. The ancient texts called such beings living springs, because their presence quenches the thirst of souls who have forgotten their source. And yet awakening is not a destination, it is a living rhythm. The moment you claim it, it slips away. The moment you surrender it, it returns. That is the paradox of enlightenment. It cannot be owned, only allowed. The more you let go, the more it fills you. This is why humility is the crown of the awakened. You stop searching for meaning because life itself becomes the meaning. Every breath is a prayer, every tear, sacred water, every silence, a cathedral. You no longer ask, "What is my purpose?" Because the question dissolves into the knowing that being itself is purpose. The flower does not question its bloom. The river does not question its course. You too begin to live with that effortless faith. In this awakened state, you rediscover joy, not excitement, not pleasure, but quiet joy that hums beneath everything. It is the joy of existence itself, uncaused, unending. It shines in your eyes, moves in your hands, breathes through your words. It is contagious. You realize this was the hidden goal of all healing, not to fix what was wrong, but to remember that nothing was ever broken. The body was never the problem, the forgetting was. Now that you remember, every cell vibrates with gratitude. You feel it when you wake, when you eat, when you drink. You have become aware that you are the consciousness tasting itself through form. The water that once healed you is still within you, circulating, whispering. It has merged with your blood, your tears, your breath. You and it are one continuous prayer. The final revelation of awakening comes in the form of silence, not the absence of sound, but the fullness of it. In this silence you feel everything, every heartbeat of creation, every whisper of wind, every sigh of the earth. It feels like home. You realize that you never left. All those years of seeking, struggling, yearning, they were the dream of separation. The awakening is the remembering that you were never lost, never unworthy, never alone. You were always the wave and the ocean, the seeker and the found, the water and the light reflecting upon it. As you close your eyes, the light behind your eyelids seems to pulse in rhythm with something infinite. You understand now that what began as a ritual was the universe teaching you its oldest truth, that everything sacred is simple, and everything simple is sacred. You take a slow breath, and for the first time, you feel it completely. Life breathing through you, not you breathing life. There is no boundary left. You are awake. You are alive. You are the current that has always been flowing beneath the noise, waiting to be remembered. The awakening is complete, yet it never ends. It unfolds, breath by breath, drop by drop, into eternity. And so it ends, as all sacred things do, not with noise, but with stillness. You wake on the 8th morning and realize there is nothing left to seek. The ritual that began with curiosity, that passed through revelation, transformation, and awakening, now rests like calm water after a storm. The glass on your table no longer feels like a tool, but like an old friend. You lift it not because of what it will do, but because of what it reminds you, that the divine hides in simplicity, that the ordinary is only ordinary until seen through the eyes of remembrance. As you drink, you taste more than water. You taste memory, forgiveness, peace. The ritual has ended, but its vibration continues, echoing through every heartbeat, every thought, every silent moment between them. You understand now that healing was never a goal. It was a return to rhythm, to resonance, to home. The body feels like soil after rain, soft, alive, fragrant with renewal. In reflection, you see how the 7 nights were never separate from the rest of your life. Each moment before them led you here. Each breath since carries you forward. The water was your teacher, but the lesson was your own soul. The ancients wrote that true healing comes when the outer ritual awakens the inner remembrance. When the hand that lifts the cup realizes it is guided by the same intelligence that made the stars. You now know what they meant. The body, once burdened by fear and fatigue, now feels like a temple rediscovered. The heart, once armored, now beats without hesitation. The mind, once noisy, now speaks softly if at all. Even silence feels like a companion. You find that prayer no longer requires words. Simply being has become enough. As you move through your day, you notice beauty where you never did before. Not grand beauty, but quiet beauty. The way light bends through a leaf, the way water circles down the drain like a miniature galaxy, the rhythm of footsteps on stone. Everything feels orchestrated, deliberate, tender. You begin to understand why the mystics said that enlightenment is not an escape from the world, but a deeper intimacy with it. To see God in everything is to realize there was never a separation to begin with. The divine was in the water, yes, but also in your laughter, your tears, your fatigue, your patience. It was in the act of drinking, but also in the one who thirsted. The cup and the hand that lifted it were never two. This truth humbles you, fills you with gratitude so deep it needs no expression. You look back on who you were before the 7 nights and realize that nothing outward has changed. The same walls, the same work, the same faces, and yet everything is different because you are seeing through different eyes. Before you saw objects, now you see essence. Before you spoke to life, now you listen to it. There is a softness to your gaze, a patience to your steps, a kindness in your silence. You no longer measure progress by achievement, but by presence. You no longer chase peace, you radiate it. That is the quiet gift of reflection. It shows you that the miracle was never in the event, but in the awareness that remained after. The nights passed, but their light endures. At times you may still forget. You may find yourself lost again in the noise of the world, reacting, rushing, fearing. But even then, you will feel it. A subtle pulse beneath the chaos, like a melody that never stopped playing. You close your eyes, take a breath, and the memory returns. The glass, the water, the whisper. The body remembers how to realign. You realize that the ritual never truly ended because it was never separate from living. Each sip of water, each inhalation of air, each quiet act of noticing, they are all continuations of the same sacred rhythm. You do not need the ceremony to connect again. You only need to be. In ancient scrolls from forgotten monasteries, there was a final teaching reserved for those who had completed the journey. When you have seen the divine in water, see it in fire. When you have heard it in silence, hear it in laughter. When you have felt it in ritual, feel it in chaos. You smile now, understanding what they meant. The sacred does not need protection, it only needs perception. You begin to live as if everything you touch is holy, because it is. You stir your tea with reverence, you walk barefoot on the earth with gratitude. You speak less, listen more, love without reason. Reflection turns your life into a living prayer. You start noticing that people respond differently to you. They smile more easily, linger longer in conversation, seem calmer in your presence. You are not doing anything. You are simply being. That is the quiet power of someone who has remembered. You do not preach, you do not convince, you simply embody. And in your presence, others begin to remember too. Healing spreads not through words, but through frequency. You have become a carrier of peace, a vessel of coherence. The world around you begins to mirror it. Plants seem more vibrant. Coincidences align effortlessly. Time flows instead of drags. The same intelligence that guided the 7 nights now orchestrates your days. You no longer need to force. You only need to allow. When you return to the water's edge, whether a river, a sink, or a simple glass, you bow inwardly. You thank it, not for what it did, but for what it revealed. You pour a little back to the earth. As the ancients did, in gratitude for the endless cycle, you realize that giving and receiving are the same act viewed from different angles. The more you give, the more flows through you. You are no longer afraid of emptiness because you have learned it is only space for grace to enter. Reflection teaches you that abundance was never about possession. It was about participation. The more you participate in life, the more it participates in you. At night, when the world grows still again, you sit in silence and feel the rhythm that began on the first night of the ritual still moving through you, slower now, steadier, like a tide that has found its moon. You think of the millions before you who also turned to water for healing, the monks, the mothers, the mystics, and realize that you were never alone in this journey. You were continuing a lineage of remembering that spans the ages. The same divine intelligence that moved through them now moves through you. It always has. It always will. And finally, when you close your eyes before sleep, you understand the secret that all healers and seekers eventually discover. That the true medicine was never in the substance, the word, or the act. It was in the awareness that sanctified them. You healed not because you drank water, but because you began to see the divine within it. You awakened not because of a ritual, but because you allowed life to speak through the ritual. The healer and the healed were never two. The seeker and the source were never apart. You were never waiting for a miracle. You were the miracle waiting to be seen. The room is quiet, the heart steady, the breath smooth. You drift into sleep, not as a body exhausted, but as a soul at peace. The night feels infinite, yet you are unafraid, for you know that the same current that carried you through those 7 nights will carry you through all that follows. You no longer chase transformation, you trust flow. You no longer ask when healing will come. You recognize it has always been here, disguised as life. And as the last thought dissolves into silence, you smile faintly, knowing this truth beyond words, that every drop of water, every breath of air, every flicker of light is the universe remembering itself through you. The ritual has ended. The remembrance has begun.